All right, let's dive in. Today we're taking a close look at Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Chapter 22. Got a lot to cover. We've got the chapter itself, obviously, and then a summary, and a pretty thorough FAQ, and a study guide. The study guide has some interesting questions. So if you're trying to, figure out this chapter, you've come to the right place.
Well, this chapter picks up right where the last one left off.
Yeah.
Remember, Sirius Black is about to get the Dementor's kiss. The tension is incredible.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And speaking of tension, Harry and Hermione's trip through time with the time turner. They're trying to save Sirius, but they have to avoid running into Fudge and Snape. And even Peeves. It's quite a ride.
Yeah.
There's actually a question in the study guide about a little detail right at the beginning. It asks what news Fudge and Snape are talking about as they're walking down the corridor. Did you notice that?
Yeah, they're talking about the Dementors. They're going to give Sirius the kiss. It's a small detail, but it really sets the mood.
Right. And then you see how Snape reacts later when Sirius escapes. He totally loses it, yelling at Harry, even snapping at Fudge. The study guide even asks about this. What do you think is going on with Snape? I mean, is it really just about Sirius getting away?
I think there's something more to it. Snape really hates Sirius.
Yeah.
Like, really hates him. And we don't really know why yet. Plus, he obviously doesn't like Harry, so it's all kind of coming out at once.
It makes you wonder what happened between them all those years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's another question in the study guide. It asks about where Harry and Hermione hide from Peeves. They can't afford to waste any time. Do you remember where they go?
They duck into an empty classroom. They just barely manage to avoid Peeves. It really shows how they can think on their feet.
Oh, yeah, definitely. They're only 13, and they're dealing with some crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of crazy, let's talk about Dumbledore. When he sees Harry and Hermione at the hospital wing entrance, he doesn't seem surprised at all. The study guide asks about this, too. It's like he knew they were up to something,
Yeah, it's really interesting. He doesn't get mad at them or anything. It's like he trusts them, He knows Harry wouldn't break the rules without a good reason.
He's probably thinking, oh, those kids and their time travel again.
Yeah.
So they make it back to their beds just in time. But then there's this sound, the study guide calls it a roar of fury. Do you remember what that was?
That was Sirius. He escaped.
Exactly. And of course, Snape completely freaks out. Like we were saying, he just loses it. The study guide asks us to really think about Snape's reaction here. Like, what does it tell us about him? And how might this affect things later on?
It definitely shows how much he hates Sirius and how much he doesn't trust Harry. I think there's some serious history there, some kind of grudge.
Yeah.
And I bet it'll come up again as the story goes on.
Oh, for sure. Okay, so then we have another big reveal. Hagrid, bless his heart, just comes right out and says that Lupin is a werewolf. And the study guide, of course, asks what this means for Lupin, especially in the wizarding world, where people are so prejudiced against werewolves.
Yeah, Lupin has to deal with a lot of fear and prejudice. He ends up resigning. It's really sad.
It is. It reminds you that prejudice can have serious consequences. Before Lupin leaves, though, he gives Harry back two important things. The study guide asks us to name them and say why they're important. Do you remember what they are?
The invisibility cloak
Yeah.
and the Marauders map.
Right. Both of those have been pretty important so far. Lupin is basically saying that he trusts Harry to use them wisely. He even jokes about Harry's dad. Like, James Potter would be disappointed if Harry didn't find all the secret passages. It's a nice moment. It shows how close Lupin was to Harry's parents.
Yeah, definitely. So then Harry talks to Dumbledore about Pettigrew escaping and about Professor Trelawney's prediction. What do you think about how Dumbledore acts in this scene?
Well, the study guide asks about that, too.
Yeah.
And it is interesting, because everything is so crazy. But Dumbledore is super calm. He has a totally different way of thinking about time and consequences than Harry does.
Yeah, Dumbledore is really wise. He knows that things don't always happen in a straight line, and that what seems bad can actually turn out to be good.
He even suggests that Pettigrew escaping might actually help in the fight against Voldemort. That's a pretty crazy idea for Harry to wrap his head around, especially since he feels like it's his fault that Pettigrew got away.
Right, and this brings up another point from the study guide, the idea of a life debt. When one wizard saves another's life, it creates a magical bond, and that could become a real problem for Voldemort as he tries to get his power back.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder how that'll play out later on. So another thing the study guide talks about is the Patronus charm. It's more than just a spell, right? What does it represent?
It's all about positive emotions. You have to think about your happiest memory, and then you use that to fight against dark creatures like Dementors. And remember, Harry's Patronus is a stag, just like his dad's. It shows how strong their connection is, even though James is dead.
It's powerful stuff. It really adds another layer to the story. The study guide also mentions the theme of friendship and loyalty. What examples of that stand out to you in this chapter?
Well, you see it with Harry, Ron, and Hermione. They always stick together even when things get tough. And then there's Sirius and James. Their friendship lasted even after James died. And of course, Lupin risks everything to protect Harry, just like James did for him years ago.
Yeah, for sure. Friendship and loyalty are really important in the story. They give the characters strength and support. I bet we'll see more of that as we go on. Okay, before we move on, there's one more question from the study guide that I want to touch on. It asks about the significance of Snape's reaction when Sirius escapes. What does that tell us about him?
I think it shows just how intense his feelings are. He really hates Sirius, and he doesn't trust Harry. It's like there's some big secret between them, maybe something that happened when they were all students at Hogwarts. And I think that unresolved conflict is going to keep affecting Snape's actions.
It really makes you wonder whose side he's on. Well, we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dives. Maybe we should take a break here and then come back and talk about what happens after Sirius escapes and how it affects everyone involved.
Okay, so let's talk about everyone's reactions to Sirius escaping. The study guide points out a few of the big ones, like Malfoy is furious. He's totally convinced that Hagrid helped Buckbeak get away. He can't believe that a mere gamekeeper outsmarted him and his dad.
Ugh, Malfoy. Always has to blame someone else.
Yeah.
Never takes responsibility for anything.
Right. He acts all entitled, like he's the victim. But really, it's his fault Buckbeak got into trouble in the first place.
Totally. He just wouldn't listen to Hagrid. Speaking of reactions, the study guide also talks about Percy Weasley. He sees Sirius escaping as a career opportunity.
Oh yeah, Percy. Always looking for a way to get ahead. He's already thinking about how he can use this to get a job at the ministry.
He's got big plans. But what about Harry? The study guide asks about how he's feeling. It must be pretty complicated.
It is. He's relieved that Sirius is safe, of course, but he's also sad because he knows he can't live with Sirius now. And then there's that prophecy. That's got to be weighing on his mind.
It's a lot for a 13-year-old to handle. But then Harry gets a letter from Sirius. The study guide says this is a really important moment. What do you think is so important about it?
Well, for one thing, it confirms that Sirius sent the firebolt, so Hermione can stop worrying about that. And Sirius also apologizes for scaring Harry that summer when he was outside the Dursleys' house.
Oh, that's nice. He really does care about Harry. But there's something else in the letter, too. Something really special. The study guide wants us to think about what it means. Any ideas?
The permission slip for Hogsmeade?
Yes. Sirius signed it so Harry can go on the weekends.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying, I can't be there with you, but I still want you to have fun.
Yeah, and it shows that he's not afraid to go against the rules.
Right. He's not letting anyone control Harry's life. So the chapter ends with Harry going back to the Dursleys, but he's not as miserable as he usually is. The study guide asks us to explain why. Why is Harry feeling hopeful?
Well, he knows Sirius is out there and that he's looking out for him. It gives Harry a sense of belonging, like he's not alone.
He has a secret connection with his godfather. It helps him get through being with the Dursleys.
Okay, so we've talked about the main points of the chapter, and we've answered those study guide questions, but there's a lot more to unpack here. Those essay questions in the study guide really make you think. Let's dive into those.
All right, that was good.
So the first one asks us to analyze Snape's reaction to Sirius escaping. What does that tell us about him? Why is he so upset?
Well, like we were saying before, he obviously has some deep resentment towards Sirius. And towards Harry. It goes beyond just wanting to catch a criminal. There's something personal there.
Yeah, it's like there's this whole backstory we don't know yet. Exactly. I think it has something to do with their time at Hogwarts, maybe some kind of rivalry or even a betrayal, and I think this unresolved conflict is going to be important later on.
It really makes you wonder what Snape's true motivations are. Okay, the next essay question is about friendship and loyalty. It asks for specific examples from this chapter.
Well, one thing that really stands out is how strong those bonds are. Even when people are apart or even dead, like Harry and his dad, James is gone, but he's still a big influence on Harry. It shows that love and loyalty can last beyond death.
And then there's Lupin. He puts himself at risk to protect Harry, just like James did.
Exactly. It shows how much he cares about them both.
Yeah. These relationships are so important in the story. They give the characters strength and support.
Yeah, they show how important human connection is, especially when you're facing difficult times.
The next essay question asks about Dumbledore and Harry's different perspectives on time. Like, how do they think about time and consequences differently?
Well, Dumbledore has a much broader view of time. He's seen a lot more than Harry. He knows that things aren't always what they seem, and that actions can have unexpected consequences.
Whereas Harry is more focused on the present. He's still trying to figure things out.
Right. But Dumbledore is trying to teach him that the future isn't set in stone, that even bad things can lead to good things.
It's a good lesson for all of us, really, to remember that there's always hope. Okay, the next essay question is about the Patronus charm. Why is it so special? What does it symbolize?
Well, it's the only spell that uses positive emotions. You have to focus on your happiest memories and use that to fight against darkness. It's a pretty powerful idea.
And the fact that Harry's Patronus is the same as his dad's. It shows how connected they are.
Yeah. It's like love can overcome even death.
It's a beautiful symbol. Okay, this last essay question is interesting. He talks about all the secrets and lies in this chapter. Like, everyone is hiding something.
Yeah.
Dumbledore, Sirius, even Harry. What's up with all the secrecy?
Well, I think it creates suspense. You never know who to trust or what the whole truth is.
It's like we're only seeing part of the story.
Exactly. And that makes you want to keep reading to find out what's really going on.
Yeah, it makes you think about the nature of truth and how it can be twisted or hidden.
I think this theme is going to be important throughout the series.
We'll have to keep our eyes peeled.
Definitely.
Okay, before we move on to our final thoughts, I think it would be helpful to go over some of those key terms from the study guide.
Oh, yeah. Good idea.
Some of them might be confusing.
Like, what exactly is a Dementor's kiss?
It sounds pretty scary.
It is. It's basically a fate worse than death. The Dementors suck out your soul, leaving you an empty shell.
That's awful.
Yeah, it's reserved for the worst criminals.
So Sirius was really lucky to escape. What about apparating and disapparating? That always seemed a bit tricky to me.
It's basically teleportation. You vanish from one place and reappear in another. But it's really dangerous if you don't do it right.
You could end up splinching yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, what about Hogsmeade? It's the only all-wizarding village in Britain. Why is it so special?
Well, it's a place where Hogwarts students can go to relax, they can hang out with their friends, buy sweets and stuff. It's a taste of freedom.
No wonder Harry wanted to go so badly.
Yeah.
Okay, another term is the Order of Merlin. It's a big award, right?
It is. It's given to witches and wizards who have done amazing things.
So why is it important for Snape?
Well, it's like a symbol of his frustration. He feels like he deserves recognition, but he hasn't gotten it. And then Sirius, who's a supposed murderer, he got the Order of Merlin. It just adds to Snape's bitterness.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, what about animagi? Those are the people who can turn into animals, right?
Right. It's a really rare and difficult skill. It takes years of practice, and it's dangerous.
And we know that Sirius, James, and Lupin were all animagi.
Yeah. It explains a lot about their adventures at Hogwarts.
Okay, what about the Time Turner? That's how Hermione goes back in time, right?
Right. It's a really powerful object, but it's also dangerous because changing the past can have unintended consequences.
Yeah, time travel is always tricky. Okay, I think we've covered most of the important terms. But there are a few more from the study guide that we should talk about.
Like what?
Well, what are NEWTS and OWLS?
Oh, those are just exams that Hogwarts students have to take. OWLs are like end-of-year exams, and NEWTS are like college entrance exams.
So they're basically the wizarding equivalent of standardized tests.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, what about Gringotts? That's the wizard bank, right?
Right, it's run by goblins.
So why is it important in this chapter?
Well, that's where Sirius keeps his money, and that's how he's able to buy the firebolt for Harry.
Oh, right.
It shows that he's still taking care of Harry, even though he's on the run.
Even fugitives need a bank account. Okay, I think we've covered all the essential terms. But before we move on to our final thoughts, there's one more question from the study guide that I want to bring up. It asks about the symbolism of Platform 9 3/4. That's the secret platform at King's Cross Station, where students get on the Hogwarts Express. Why is it so important?
Well, it's like a portal between the Muggle world and the Wizarding world.
It's a hidden place. But once you know where to look, you can find it.
Exactly. It's like magic itself.
Okay, the study guide also talks about the symbolism of the firebolt, that amazing broomstick that Sirius gave Harry. What does it represent?
Well, it's a symbol of freedom and speed and adventure.
All the things that Harry wants.
Yeah, especially after being stuck with the Dursleys all summer.
It's like Sirius is giving Harry wings,
Literally and figuratively.
so he could escape his ordinary life and embrace the magic.
Exactly.
Okay, I think we've really explored this chapter in depth, but there's one last question from the study guide that I want to leave you with. It asks, Considering Dumbledore's perspective on time and consequences, could Pettigrew's escape actually be a good thing in the fight against Voldemort? It's a thought-provoking question.
It is a good question. It seems like a bad thing at first, Pettigrew getting away, especially with that prophecy.
Right.
But Dumbledore, he always sees things differently.
Yeah.
He's talking about the life debt.
Oh, right.
Because Harry saved Pettigrew's life.
But now Pettigrew owes Harry something.
Yeah, like a magical debt. He's bound to Harry.
Wow.
And Dumbledore thinks that could be a problem for Voldemort. I mean, think about it. Pettigrew was supposed to be loyal to Voldemort. But now he's connected to Harry.
That's interesting. It's like a hidden advantage.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We've talked about the main points of the chapter and those study guide questions. What are the big takeaways? What should we be thinking about as we move on in the series?
Well, this chapter is a turning point for Harry. He's been through so much. He's faced danger. He's learned the truth about Sirius. And he's made some tough choices.
He's grown a lot.
He has. He's shown how strong he is and how much he wants to do the right thing.
And he has Sirius now.
Even though he's on the run, Sirius is still there for Harry. Yeah.
I think all of this will stay with Harry as he faces even bigger challenges.
So what advice would you give our listeners as they continue reading Prisoner of Azkaban?
I'd say go back and read chapter 22 again. Now that you know what we've talked about, think about those essay questions. Look for the symbolism and the themes. There's so much to discover.
It's a really rich chapter.
It is. Well, that's it for our deep dive on chapter 22. Thanks for listening. And keep reading. There's a lot more to come in this story.